Hey friends, thank you for watching. The more that we look into Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, I don't know if you've experienced this too, but one thing I've experienced is the more I look into it, the more I don't know. So I thought I would make a quick video of what we actually do know. And one thing that we do know is that the photos, for some reason, that have been released to us are not the same quality as the photos that were actually taken by Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, if they took them at all. The photo quality of that camera is much higher than the photo quality that we have, and that's why it's so difficult to even examine the photos that we have that have been released, because they're so low quality. And to me, I think that's a form of distortion. If something's one quality, but then you lessen the quality to the public, well, then that's distortion. Anyway, I the photos aren't the same quality as they were taken. I think most photo experts will say that. Speaking of photos, the photo, the frame 509, the deletion of it. We know it was deleted. Most people say that you need a computer to do it. Now, I've also heard that, I've heard some camera people, photo people say, well, sometimes a camera can get a glitch and it can you can delete something on the camera and you don't necessarily need a computer. Normally you need a computer to delete something in the manner that it was deleted on that camera. However, sometimes things happen with technology and sometimes it doesn't. But keep this in mind. No photo was deleted on that camera during that trip to Panama. No photo was deleted except for the one photo between the between the April 1st April 1st photos and the nighttime photos. The one photo that's in between all those is the one that's deleted. Isn't that suspicious? What else do we know? Well, we don't have the phone logs from the phone company, and I believe that that could tell us a bunch. We do have phone records from the actual phones themselves. Now, have they been messed with? I don't know. But from what we actually have, what to me is very, very, very striking is the lack of emergency phone calls. The lack of phone calls to people they might have known. I mean, friends, if I'm lost in the woods, I'm calling someone every 30 minutes, whether I have a signal or not. And just 2 phone calls on April 1st that were made, and you have like 7 phone calls total the first 3 days. I mean, that's just the lack of phone calls recorded on that phone. If that's to be believed, it's crazy. So what else do we have? Well, we had the remains. And the remains, well, the state of the remains can't really be argued. I kind of question the DNA, the Panamanians' honesty in doing a DNA search. But if we just look at the remains themselves, okay, we have a pelvic bone that's bleached, been decomposed for a while. We also have other bones that were found in the foot that are still part of the flesh. There's still flesh, bone marrow. And then we have a piece of skin that's not very decomposed. So you have a piece of skin that's not very decomposed. You have bones that still have flesh in them, and then you have a bleached pelvic bone. And it's not even a whole pelvic bone. It's part of a pelvic bone. Friends, that is crazy. Like the wide spectrum of decomposition here. And they want us to believe that they died in relatively the same time period. You know, do we really even have enough to say that both women have perished with the remains we found? Okay, so what else do we have? Well, with the remains, with the belongings that were found, we have a bunch of fingerprints. That's a fact. We have a bunch of fingerprints. And what's also a fact is those fingerprints weren't cross-examined. Those fingerprints weren't highly investigated. Why were they not highly investigated? How can you rule somebody lost and then you find their belongings that have a bunch of fingerprints on them, and you don't search into the fingerprints. So you want to know who touched them? To me, that's absurd. That's crazy. How can anyone honestly go and say that they're the lost theory? How can you believe that these women just got lost in the woods and then their belongings have a bunch of fingerprints on them and they don't do any investigation about the fingerprints? You don't. Do you see how crazy that is? But that's a fact. They have a bunch of fingerprints. What's also a fact? There's remains found with Kris and Lisanne's remains. Some say 2 others, some say 3 others. But there was at least 2 others and probably 3 other people that had remains with body parts of Kris and Lisanne. That happened. Does that sound like just some people randomly passed away at the same spot? Or does it sound like some sort of dumping ground? And it sounds more like a dumping ground, doesn't it? Unfortunately, yes. Then we also have the search. The search is a big thing. On April 3rd, we had these woods are searched. Get this, there's more evidence for this search than there is evidence that Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon were even on the trail. This search, and people want to downplay this search. Friends, helicopters were involved in this search. Helicopters were involved. On April the 3rd to the 7th, on April 3rd to the 6th, we have tour guides, we have indigenous people, and we have locals. These people knew the trail well. Do we not think that they would know the higher risk areas of this trail? This trail, you're searching it for all these days. Well, just to get to the summits, not that long, obviously they're searching beyond the summit. On April 7th, you had the Dutch come. You have the parents come, and they come with dogs cadaver dogs that search for dead bodies, and they have search and rescue dogs. And they can't find them. So you have dogs, you have investigators, you have tour guides, you have indigenous people that know this trail, and this area, this region is well searched. This area is well searched. So what else do we have? What else do we know? We know, I think it was on the 3rd. I think it was on April 3rd. It could have been on April. It could have been later. I forget. But we do know, I think it was April 3rd. We have a German tourist that says that he heard a scream, he heard a thump, and he saw men around a certain area. And it wasn't the Pianista Trail. It was off. It was a ways away, but it was still in the general region. On April 3rd or 4th, I think it was the 3rd he saw this. If I'm wrong with the date, I'll correct it in the comments section. Isn't that weird that this man, he saw this and he heard this at the same time period that Lisanne Froon and Kris Kremers were gone? That he sees a possible, men with the women that are doing something with the women and causing them to scream, and then isn't that weird? And then to follow that up, we know for a fact that we have French tourists who, it might be hearsay, but hearsay is still something. They're passing on that they heard screams in the forest. And, when we put all this stuff together, just the stuff that we know, just the stuff that we can just grab a hold of and say, this happened for sure, like the remains. Do we really even have much evidence that the lost theory is even, the likelihood is so low. Honestly, I'm at the point here where, I don't want to dispute somebody, but I'm probably 95% foul play and 5% loss. That's probably where I am. Anyway, friends, thank you for watching and take care.